G'day and welcome back to A Legal Studies Teacher Reads the News. Thought I'd do something a little bit different today. I'm going to read this article called Police State Stopping the Virus with the Full Brunt of the Law. I think it's actually a very helpful case study for a skill that lots of legal studies students need a bit of work at. It's quite a difficult skill. It's something I'm constantly working hard with my class on. And it's this skill, evaluating the effectiveness of the legal and non-legal responses to this issue. So for law in practice, note this is we need to have at least 2 contemporary issues studied. Look, honestly, if your teacher's not doing COVID-19, I think there's something that they should be looking at, because it's a really, really interesting contemporary issue where there's so much information. And really, these are two kind of the responsiveness of the legal system in dealing with the issue and the effectiveness of legal and non-legal mechanisms in achieving justice for individuals and societies. So in order to evaluate, this is the criteria the syllabus sets out. And basically what I do with my class is say, let's try and come up with some kind of acronym to help. There's a whole bunch of acronyms out there. Whatever works best for you. We use HAMPERA. Has justice been achieved? Application of the rule of law, meeting society's needs, protection of individual rights. Then we swap enforceability, responsiveness, resource efficiency, and accessibility. HAMPERA. So what I thought I would do is go through this article and just have a think through which one of these criteria are most useful for evaluating what they've done, and if we're actually thinking about what they've done, how does it fit into the question of LEPRA, the Law Enforcement Police and Responsibilities Act, the idea of enforcing the law. There's so much in this article. Let's have a look at it. This is by Michael Koziol. So thanks. Hopefully I have pronounced your name correctly. It's a particularly Australian version of hell, being turfed off the beach or kicked out of the park by police. The very thought was unimaginable just a month ago, but that is the harsh reality of life under the restrictions taken to contain the spread of the coronavirus. Straight up, I know it seems like an introduction, but get your legal studies hats on and have a think. What do we got here? That's the harsh reality of life under the restrictions taken to contain the spread of the coronavirus. Looking over it here, what have we got? Surely, this is a question of meeting society's needs. So depending on what the issue is, there's going to be a difference in how the law responds. Some issues are much smaller than this, and if the law responds in a certain way, you'd say that's huge, overreach. Other issues are deadly, and it's really important that the legal response is quick, that it is full on and does what it can. So at the moment, what are we doing? We're trying to contain the spread of the coronavirus. Places of social gathering have been progressively shut down and various other liberties gradually eroded. Note the legal talk here, various other liberties. For weeks, Australians have been told to stay home unless they must go out. But then, on Tuesday, state governments began to enforce that policy using the full brunt of the law. Okay, so what we've got here is this concept of official government advice has been given. Australians have been told, unless you're an essential worker, and there's been this question of what is an essential worker, but unless you're an essential worker, stay home. You shouldn't be going out unless you're exercising, going to get food, etc., etc. Then we've changed from that to actually enforcing this advice. So we've gone from the Premier and Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, saying this, and this, and then we've actually got things like this picture. Mounted police coming up to a couple sitting there going, what are you doing? Move on. In New South Wales, you can be fined up to $11,000 or sent to prison for 6 months for leaving the house without one of 16 prescribed reasonable excuses. That is the possible outcome if a case goes to court. Most people would probably rather cop the $1,000 on the spot infringement notice. Okay, so note this. This is a pretty powerful kind of change in power when it comes to what the police are capable of. They're walking around, interrupting people going about their days and saying, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And if they don't like the reason, they can hand out a $1,000 on-the-spot fine. Okay, that's a massive amount of new power handed out to police officers. In Victoria, it even goes further. Victoria's stay-at-home direction set out similar restrictions with fines of up to $20,000, no jail time though. And in Victoria, the order reaches into the private home, explicitly banning people from admitting anyone who doesn't ordinarily live at their residence, with a few specific exceptions. Okay, so that's even further than New South Wales. That's, someone comes in to drop off some essential supplies. You're not allowed to let them into your home. It's against the law for you to let them into your home for a cup of coffee. It's no wonder the issue has proved vexing. Everybody wants to stop the virus. Most people agree on the need for some form of social and economic shutdown to bring that about. Many wanted stricter lockdowns. But the sight of these policies being enforced with state power has been sobering, especially given the size of the penalties. So note that if these were $200 fines, I'm not sure this issue would be anywhere near as vexing. But that's $1,000. The median income for the Australian worker is what, $65,000? Okay, so we're talking almost a week's wages for the average worker being handed out for going outside of your home. This has led to inevitable accusations that we are now in a police state. State and territory governments have gone further than the National Cabinet, led by Prime Minister Scott Morrison, suggested. The Cabinet resolved to ban gatherings of more than 2 people, which has happened. It issued strong advice that people stay at home unless for an essential purpose, but it did not explicitly resolve that this should be legally enforced. States have elected to do so. So note that. So this is official federal government advice that's been handed down, and the state government, using their residual powers, have chosen to enforce this. Okay, so let's just jump over to Hampera. What are we talking about here? Enforceability, most certainly. Responsiveness, how has the government responded? Has it responded quickly? Has it responded too much? Has it responded not enough? Protection of individual rights. Surely I can go out and walk down to a park by myself and sit down. How is that against the law? That's what a lot of people are asking. Once again, obviously meeting society's needs. We're going to have a look at a second of application of the rule of law. Furthermore, there has been confusion. The rules differ between states, and authorities have been unable to issue clear and consistent answers to common, reasonable questions about what people are allowed to do. In thousands of comments on social media and newspaper articles, people ask why they can still shop at a crowded Bunnings or get a haircut, but can't sit alone in the park. Okay, so this is the application of the rule of law. So if you're enforcing this, if you're handing out $1,000 on-the-spot fines for somebody sitting at a park and they're not able to say why they're there, oh, sorry, I wasn't exercising, I just walked down to the park and sat by myself, how is that consistent? If I go to Bunnings and there's 500 or 600 people there and we're all walking around buying renovation gear to do while we're at home. How is that essential? But this other person gets a $1,000 fine. It continues. You'd be forgiven over the past couple of weeks for saying that you didn't understand the laws because they've not been drafted in the usual way. They've been made on the run, says Barrister Greg Barnes, who is also the spokesman for the Australian Lawyers Alliance. It's important that as a matter of fairness, the laws are set out clearly and that they are not simply left to discretionary interpretation on the part of the police and public health officials. So this is a very interesting paragraph. This is saying, hang on, when it comes to law reform, you guys haven't done this the right way. This is talking about responsiveness. This is also talking about the application of the rule of law. How on earth are we able to know what we're supposed to do if it's not clear, if it's not set down, if it hasn't been done in a systematic fashion? And then here we are with the Australian Lawyers Alliance saying, it's completely up to police officers and public health officials as to what they think the law means. They're discretionary, that means their ability to choose, their interpretation. So police are walking around choosing who to give $1,000 fines to, and where did they receive training for that? Where are they going from? Where are the clearly set guidelines that I can look at and a police officer can look at and we can agree that this was the wrong thing to do? Continuing, but police discretion, perhaps inevitably, is what it all boils down to. New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller has sought to assure the public his officers will wield their power sensibly. In fact, he told the Herald he was personally reviewing each infringement notice to make sure it was issued lawfully. Wow, that's an interesting point, isn't it? All right, he's really trying to tamp down this concern about the strong discretionary powers of the police force. At the same time, Fuller's declared himself disappointed with some officers' actions on day one of the new rules after Sky News captured footage of police driving through Rushcutters Bay Park with their windows down, telling people to stop sunbaking. Could they have got out of the car and achieved the same thing in a less aggressive way? Yes, they could, he said. Is that the sort of policing practices we want to see in New South Wales? No, it's not. Fuller acknowledged there would be days when people felt aggrieved by the way these laws were enforced. Once again, enforceability and application of the rule of law. At the same time, they have to be enforceable. If it can't be policed, then it's not good legislation. That's a great little quote there, isn't it? Governments have not covered themselves in glory when it comes to the details. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews has been especially Bolshevik, communist, in instructing citizens to stay home at all costs, including his dictum, this is the law, on Wednesday that lovers who don't live together should not visit each other. But later that day, the state's chief medical officer, Brett Sutton, reversed course, tweeting, "We have no desire to penalise individuals who are staying with or meeting partners if they don't usually reside together. We'll be making an exception." So this is all about mixed messages here. Meanwhile, New South Wales government advisors were telling journalists that visiting your partner was not technically allowed under the public health law, but was unlikely to be policed in any serious way. So how is that for a double standard? So if I'm sitting in the park receiving $1,000 fine for supposedly breaking the law, but if someone visits their partner and it's not technically allowed under public health law, they've just said we won't police it. How is that a fair application of the rule of law? Then at a press conference on Wednesday, Fuller said it was absolutely fine to visit your partner because it involved giving care to another person and was part of preserving good mental health. Behind him, Premier Gladys Berejiklian nodded furiously and said, "Yeah," several times. Look at that, like a sermon. Yeah. So responsiveness is clearly part of this. Governments are not giving a clear message. Governments are not being particularly on point when it comes to the details. Berejiklian has tried to strike a reassuring tone. She spoke of the need to absorb the new rules and adjust to them and innovate in the way people live their lives. She also sought to clear up some of the uncertainties around what people can do outside, especially they can exercise but not linger. If you do so, you risk a fine. The advice is that you should be walking through, you shouldn't be stationary at those locations, Berejiklian said, because if a number of people decide to be stationary, that's an unsafe place. So we're saying to people, exercise, but walk through. Don't stop and stay at a location. I appreciate that for some people this seems onerous, but this is to keep our community safe. And again, it's part of our no regrets policy. So thinking through, she's clearly talking about meeting society's needs and saying, yes, it's inconvenient, but this is the point. One reason people may find these new rules onerous is that they have been introduced at exactly the same time as the number of new coronavirus cases appear to be stabilizing. Medical experts have cautioned against cracking open the champagne straight away, but the positive signs seem at odds with the ever-escalating infringement on civil liberties. So there's this question of, well, all of a sudden, people are questioning, is this what society needs right now? Why am I giving up my individual rights when it seems that the coronavirus is stabilizing and is actually, the rate of it is getting smaller? Peter Collignon, an infectious diseases physician and microbiologist at Canberra Hospital and a professor at the Australian University, has made the same point, accusing authorities of overcooking the response for no genuine public health benefit. You are safer outside than inside. I do not see how anyone's going to get this virus if they keep 2 meters away from someone, and I don't see how anyone's going to get it if they sit on a park bench, Coleman told the Canberra Times. I think this is not sustainable for 6 months. This is another question, isn't it? Sustainability. We have to do everything we can to minimize the spread to others, but not do things that don't even make biological sense. My real worry is if we overdo it now, we will have people, particularly in their 30s, 40s, who say, stuff this. Then it continues on Andrew Bolt and all of his magnificent complaints, etc., etc., etc. But it's well worth a read, and hopefully it's shown you how you can talk about evaluating. So it's asking questions. It's asking, well, enforceability. How enforceable are these laws? And it seems like they are, but it becomes this question of if they're enforced too much, will people actually start going against them? As Peter Collignon says, it's talking about meeting society's needs. How important is it for these to be enforced brutally and at all times? It's about individual rights. It's about the responsiveness and the clarity of the message that the government is giving. So if I'm looking at the effectiveness of the legal and non-legal responses to this issue, I would say here's the question, here's the criteria I'm going to use. I'd choose 3 of that criteria, and I'd talk about the government has done this, this, and this, and it's brought up questions of individual liberties, of individual rights. It's brought up questions of meeting society's needs. How much is required? How much taking away someone's liberties is required? And from a responsiveness kind of way, has it been too little? Has it been too late? Has it been too full on? Has it been too unclear? So hopefully that's just a very quick example of how me as a legal studies teacher reads this article and thinks about the legal studies syllabus and how the law looks in practice when I am evaluating the effectiveness of legal responses.